everyone, I hope you are all doing well. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is the first of my videos you were clicking on. I am going to talk through the 9 books that I read in February. 7 of them were on my Kindle and 2 of them were physical. So I thought I would let you know my thoughts and feelings. So the first book I am going to be talking about is The X-Files by Jessica Joyce. I read most of this in January, but I finished it in February, which is what I am including it. I absolutely loved this. I thought this was amazing. It is a second chance romance where our 2 main characters dated previously, and then for one reason or another they split up. Not so much because they didn't care about each other anymore or because they had a big falling out, but just the timing was wrong, or they were in different parts of their life, or maybe their priorities were slightly different. But they have a mutual best friend who is getting married, and they come back together to help finalise plans for the wedding that everyone thinks is cursed. So they end up going to where the venue's going to be. So there's a bit of forced proximity, and they spend time together again, and obviously feelings come up, and they chat and they talk about what happened and where they're at now. And it was just really beautifully written. I really cared about both the characters. I was really rooting for them. I absolutely love a second chance romance anyway, and this one was beautifully done, and I gave this 5 stars. The next book I finished in February, again did start it in January but finished it in February, was Onyx Storm. I read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame both in January. I read both of them within a week and I absolutely loved them. This, I took 2 weeks to read the first half and 2 days to read the second half, which I really think sums up the book. There is obviously a lot of info dumping. It's obviously the middle of a series. It's the third in what will be a 5-book series. There's less of the romance, and I am someone that is driven by romance aspects in a fantasy. It helps me a lot. And I do think that this book will become obvious why this book is important maybe when we've read the last 2. I'm gonna have to reread the ending before I read the next one, but obviously got plenty of time for that. Overall, I did enjoy it. The second half was so much stronger for me. The second half was probably 5 stars, but because I really struggled with the first half, I gave it a 4 overall, which is still a really good book. The first 2 were definite 5 stars for me. 4 stars is still amazing. It still means I loved it. And I know I'm not on my own with the opinions about this one, but I do think the series as a whole is still a 5-star series for me, and I am looking forward to the next one. I know that Rebecca Yarros has taken a break, so it'll be a while till we get it, but I am really looking forward to finishing the series. Next one, which I read, which was a physical copy that I have lent to a family member who wanted to read it based on my Goodreads review, which was basically wow, was Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan, which is book 1 in the Skyland series. Again, this is another second chance romance, which, as I said earlier, I absolutely love. But this one was different in the sense that these main characters were married. They've got 2 children who are sort of early teen and then sort of 10 or 11, I think, maybe a little bit younger. They were married. Something happened which forced them apart. So now the story starts a couple of years down the road when they're co-parenting and they're also partners in a business, and it's how they are managing what their new family dynamic looks like, and also it's at the point where maybe they're both thinking about dating other people and what that looks like and how that makes the other person feel. I just thought this was so beautiful. It was really beautifully written. There are some really strong themes in there, so I would definitely check trigger warnings, particularly around pregnancy and pregnancy loss. I cared so much about the characters, and there was where I hoped the book would go, and but it wasn't it was definitely going to go there. Like, I couldn't really call it whether or not it was going to go how I wanted it to. It was incredible. I have got the second one on my physical TBR, which I just haven't got to yet. So this is the second one. First one being this down here, Before I Let Go. Absolutely incredible. Can't recommend it enough. Kelly D. Ryan is now going to be a must-read author for me, just from reading that one book of hers. I absolutely loved it. Easy, 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 5 stars. Next book that I read was on my Kindle, and that was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I rated this as 3 stars. I've got nothing against Abby Jimenez's writing. I enjoyed it. 3 stars for me is still a good book. I don't fully get the hype, but I can see why people enjoy it. I've also read, I did it backwards, which maybe has changed my enjoyment potentially, but I read Just for the Summer first, then I've read this one. I don't think I'm going to read Part of Your World, and I don't think that I'm particularly going to reach for Abby Jimenez books unless there's like a synopsis that really intrigues me. I really liked the characters, I really liked Jacob. So overall, it was an enjoyable read. It's just not one that I would rave about. So yeah, I gave that 3 stars. Okay, so the 5th book I read in February was The Frontrunner by Elsie Silver. This series, I didn't get into it the way I did with Chestnut Springs. The first two were absolutely fine, really good, rated them 4s, I think. Enjoyable, but again, nothing to rave about for me. This one took the series up a notch. I absolutely loved that it was from the point of view of a character that wasn't particularly liked in the first 2. So rather than following the tradition of it being a sibling or a friend or someone you already like, to have it from the point of view of someone that you're kind of told or they're portrayed in a way for you not to like them, really brought something to this for me, because it gave story more depth, because there's also the what's the word I'm trying to look for? There's also the added layer of there needing to be a bit of a redemption arc for the character for you to get on board. And obviously, if you've read this one, you'll know that that is majorly helped by our female main character. She's incredible. She's my favourite out of the 4 in this series, because I have since read the 4th one, which will be in my March wrap up. I really enjoyed this. I read it really quickly. I think I read it in 3 days, which for me, because I always have multiple books on the go, for me to finish a book in 3 days is pretty good, because I won't have only been reading this one at the same time. Really, really enjoyed it. And for me, this makes me recommend the Gold Rush Ranch series. You would, I think, to get the same out of this one, you would have to read the first 2, which are not bad books, they're good books. But this is where the series really went up a notch for me. Okay, so the next book was The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J Maas. I love Sarah J Maas's books. I've read the whole of ACOTAR. That was a 5-star series for me. Court of Mist and Fury is probably my favourite book ever. Throne of Glass so far for me has been a 5-star series. Absolutely loved Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. Heir of Fire I also really enjoyed. I tried reading this prior to Heir of Fire, which is when it's recommended, and I DNF'd it. I just couldn't get into it at all. The first 2 stories for me completely dragged, and I was partway through the 3rd one and I was like, this is taking me so far out of the story that I almost just don't care. And I get why it exists as a book, but for me, we were just building up to something bad happening with Sam, and which you'd know from like the first 2 books. And yeah, I just didn't want to read it. So anyway, I DNF'd it before Heir of Fire, read Heir of Fire and was really happy to be back in the main story and got back into it all. And then my sister-in-law, who is now on Kingdom of Ash, so she's a few books ahead of me, said, you need to read this before you go any further. It becomes really clear from Queen of Shadows onwards why you need to read this book. So I did, and actually where I had DNF'd it, literally a couple of pages or a chapter later, it got really good. So a bit like Onyx Storm, this was very much a book of two halves, where the first 2.5 stories dragged, but then sort of halfway through the third one and the fourth and fifth were really good, were much more fast paced. And in the end, I ended up giving it a 4 stars, which is arguably, well, I think it was a 3.5, but on Goodreads you can't give a half, so I think I rounded it up. 3.5 is probably still generous, because I've now then just finished Queen of Shadows, and that was incredible, and it doesn't seem right that these two would be so close, so I think this is probably more of a 3 star, so I'll probably change my rating on Goodreads. I get why you've got to read it, but also I don't think the series would be missing anything if this book didn't exist. But maybe I will be corrected as I go further down. So like I said, I've just finished Queen of Shadows, due to do the tandem read next, but I've lent out Tower of Dawn, so once that comes back, and I get the urge to, because I definitely do take a break between series like this, it might become even more obvious, and then I might finish the series and be like, no, we definitely needed Assassin's Blade. But current thoughts are, it was a 3 star, it was okay, didn't love it, sort of wish we didn't need to read it. Next book I read, which was also on my Kindle, but I don't have it on my Kindle anymore, was The Highland Fling by Meghan Quinn. So in this, you've got two best friends who need to get away, need a break, and they see an advert for 6 months in a little village in Scotland, to run the cafe there. So they just decide to go for it and get the fresh start that they need for different reasons. I didn't love this book, to be honest. I am, again, now that I've had a little bit of time, I think I'm going to put my rating down, because earlier I said that 3 is still a good book. This should not be the same rating as Yours Truly. Yours Truly is a much better book. This is my 3rd book by Meghan Quinn, and I think I've now come to the conclusion that she's just not an author for me, which is absolutely fine, because not everyone, like, reading is subjective, and it's nothing against her as an author. I just think her books aren't quite for me. I thought that there were bits that were dragged out, there were bits that were then rushed. It was an enemies to lovers, but there was no reason for them to be lovers. There was no reason for them to be enemies, but then that switched really quickly anyway. There was a miscommunication trope in it, which is my least favourite of the tropes. And then there were some really hard situations that they had to deal with as well. So there were aspects of the book that was good, but overall it just wasn't for me. I didn't really enjoy it, so I think I'm going to change my rating from a 3 star to a 2 star. Okay, and then the next book I read in February, the second to last book, was Lights Out by Navessa Allen. I absolutely loved this. This was such an easy 5 stars for me. I found it really funny. I found the storyline, there was actually plot. For the first part I was a bit like, there's not really any plot, but then some plot happened. It's mafia, it's cat and mouse, stalker, dark romance, so obviously check trigger warnings. If you're not into dark romance, this won't be for you. I laughed out loud at some of it, really loved both the characters, really loved them together, and I just had a great time. And again, I read it in like 2 days, and I can't wait for the rest of the series. And I have recommended this to one of my friends who really loves dark romance as well, and she's really enjoying it. And yeah, Lights Out, one of my favourite books of the year so far. And finally in February I read an arc which I was kindly sent by NetGalley, and that was We Are the Match by Mary E. Roach. This was, when I read the synopsis of this, I was just really intrigued. So it's modern day mafia, but almost like a Greek mythology, because it's a Helen of Troy and Paris retelling. It's sapphic. It was really, really good. I originally rated it 4 stars, and then when it came to doing my quick fire read and wrap up on TikTok, I realised that I'd actually not stopped thinking about it since I'd finished it, like a few days or almost a week before. So I bumped it up to a 5 because I think if you're still thinking about the book and sort of missing the characters and wishing you were still in the story, then that, in my opinion, deserves to be a 5 star. Again, theme of this, I obviously had a very caring month in February. I really rooted for the characters. Both of them were flawed. Both of them had, like I said, had their issues. They were complex. There was trauma that they were both dealing with. And it was really, really good. I haven't read anything else about this author. I will do in the future. It's due to come out in July this year, I believe. It was really good. I read it on my Kindle, but I will be getting a paperback copy for my shelves once it's been released because it was really, really good. So that was all of the books that I read in February. Overall, I think I had a really good month. I had 1, 2, 3, 5 stars of books I've only read in Feb, and then the X-Files, which I mostly read in January, was also a 5 star. I'll finish that in Feb. So a really, really good book overall. Couple of not so great, but that's to be expected. So yeah, let me know if you have read any of the books I've mentioned or if they are on your TBR. Let me know if I'm being too harsh on the Assassin's Blade. I think that it's quite controversial. But then I have seen some people on my TikTok have also said that it drags. Someone said 3.5 was way too generous. But yeah, thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye.